Welcome to another fabulous, fantastic, and epic show called My Orgasmic Life. And I'm your hostess with the mostest, Gaia Morrissette. And today I have a special guest. I have a porn expert. I'm just so excited. I have so much fun just saying that. I don't know why, it just makes me giggle. I'm gonna allow herself. I'm gonna give her the floor to introduce who she is, what she kind of does in the world before we get into our conversation about pornography.
All right, hi. I'm Lynsey G. I have been calling myself a porn critic for a while because it's like a cool term. I don't know if it really applies so much anymore. Because I started out as a porn DVD reviewer, and for a long time I was doing reviews. But over the past, 8 years, I've transitioned to more of a journalist. So I like to say I'm a porn journalist these days.
Nice, yeah. Nice. All right, porn journalist.
And that could be taken in several different ways.
What do you want to talk about? What do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk about, actually, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to get in there, so what kind of porn do you like to watch or consume? That's a better way of putting it, because there's so many different styles of porn. There's watching porn, reading porn, listening to porn. So what kind of porn do you like to consume?
Well, I like visual porn, so I like video porn. I think that I could really like written porn, but I just never really gave it a chance because I've been professionally talking about video porn for the past 15 years. So it's really kind of cemented my habits. But yeah, I like video porn. And I'm thinking about just my viewing habits more recently. And I have a pretty wide range of tastes now that I think about it.
Okay, what are your top 3 genres? Genres that you like to consume.
I watch a lot of lesbian porn.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably, if you looked at my viewing history, probably number 1.
Okay.
And more recently, interestingly, I found a particular niche, which is solo, female, usually cam girl style, girls with not stockings, what do you call them? Knee socks or thigh high socks on. Just particularly this has really been doing it for me.
Nice.
And then after that,
are they doing anything? Are they just wearing them and just sitting there wearing them and turning you on? Or are they pleasing themselves and masturbating?
Yeah, usually masturbating. But there's not really any particular way of doing that. That, I don't know, something about the socks just I find very visually pleasing, apparently.
Nice.
And after that, probably threesome porn. I have always really liked threesome and group sex porn.
Nice.
But I just find that recently I've been watching a little bit less of it.
Well, we go in cycles, right?
Yeah, we grow, we evolve.
We evolve, right?
We change.
All right, so fair is fair. I just outed you. My turn, I'll share. All right, so my favorite kind or style of consumption of porn would be reading porn. I really like the reading porn because then I can skim over all the stupid shit that annoys me in a story, and I can drop in. I find that I have more control in my imagination. For me, it's so I can drop into, she's the appropriate age that I would like her to be, and so I can put all the details that turn me on and take out all the details that would normally turn me off about certain stories. So there's a lot more of variety for me in that piece. Yeah,
that's really an interesting perspective. Yeah.
Right. But when I find that if I visually watch porn, it has to be exact or it doesn't get me off.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So you have to find the visuals that you would otherwise be imagining.
Exactly.
Huh.
Exactly. So for me, I find it that that's what works the best for me, because otherwise I'd be like, yeah, I don't like her voice, or I don't like his attitude, or I don't, it's not my thing. Oh, I was so into it, and then they said something stupid. Like, here's all this stuff,
Yeah.
right? It's like, man, I was just ready to orgasm.
Yeah, I get that.
So I found that for me anyways, if I read it, then I can skim it, take it out, put in what I wanted to put in, all of those pieces.
Oh, that is interesting to me, because that is like a whole realm of pornography that I'm not very familiar with, because like I said, I've been doing other stuff the whole time.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting. Maybe you go on that adventure for us to have a conversation about what that experience is like.
That sounds fun.
After that adventure. Okay, so and then my 3 genres, right? Fair is fair. I really like kinky stuff. So I'm really into the BDSM, the power exchange, the humiliation, water sports is a big one for me. And for anybody who's listening that's like, well, what's water sports, Gaia? I'm not talking about water polo or ski doing. I'm talking about peeing.
Maybe a little slip and slide
with with some pee. Okay, just so that we're clear on what we're talking about. On the same page. I also like the whole group stuff, but more from like a train perspective than from a gangbang perspective.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. That's something we could talk about. Like train versus gangbang, the appeal of one versus the other.
All right. So that's great. Now hold on. Before we get into that piece, I want to go check in with our Facebook Live people, because I don't have their screen up right now.
I feel like the Facebook Live people can't actually talk about anything that we're talking about in text, or Facebook will like come in with the hammer.
So they get to be voyeurs. They get to be voyeurs. Lovely voyeurs. We love you. Thanks for voyeuring with us.
Voyeuring? Voyeuring?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's see here. Oh, wait. Where we go? There we go. Yes. Okay. So, yes, unfortunately, you can't give too many details, or, weigh in on, you guys can't really weigh in on, what kind of genre you're watching or any of that kind of stuff, because Facebook's going to go a big poo-poo and then shut this whole conversation down really quickly. Okay.
We're flying under the radar.
We're totally flying under the radar. So, I mean, it's bad enough I put in the title porn, just so that you knew what you were getting yourself into as you were listening to this conversation. Okay. So, if you would like, let's see, how do we do this? Well, you're just going to have to enjoy. This is a show where you get to enjoy, and you don't get to interact. You get to watch us. It's just like porn. Right? You don't get to interact with the porn that you're...
I mean, sometimes you can use like a 0 instead of an O, or a 3 instead of an E, that kind of thing. If you want to try to like dance around typing something that Facebook might, but it's a dicey thing, because you never
so
know
I
exactly
say this is just a show of where you get to just watch. You just get to be a voyeur, enjoy, sit back, enjoy the show. And if you have any conversations that you want to talk about, you can, or any questions that you like, major questions that you might have, you can send it to a PM, and then, we'll have Lynsey back on, and then we can like specifically ask her those questions. Okay. So that's how we're going to do that. Cool. That's how we're going to roll. All right, here we go.
Do it.
Okay. So, all right, what we're going to talk about? Gangbang versus train.
Yeah. Well, I'm so intrigued by your reading habit, though, and I have other questions there.
Okay.
Like,
well, let's start there. Okay, go.
Okay. So I feel like most kink stuff, at least for the past like decade, in visual porn, it's almost always been filmed by kink.com. Like most of the kink porn that's out there was filmed by kink.com. Most of it for a while was in the Armory. So you always have a very dungeon feel to it, like very dungeon in a castle feel, which is very specific. And like, I always feel like it's kind of dark. There's stark lighting. The lighting is almost always coming from above. So you get really dramatic shadows. So if like there's something, if somebody's wet or if there's any like water going on or lube or anything, it's like very shiny. So I'm wondering, when you are reading like kink porn, do you have, what does it look like in your mind? Is the setup kind of similar to that?
Well, I have my own dungeon. So it kind of like, and I explore, like, so I spend a lot of time actually exploring in my dungeon. So my dungeon is kind of, it's not really very scary. Like, it's not that kind of like really dark dungeony space. It's like it has exposed brick wall and, you know, wood floors and, you know, there's quite a bit of light coming in, even though it's in the basement, there's quite a bit of light coming in. And so I think when I'm the other thing is that I'm not actually, it's really interesting that you asked me this question. I don't really think about the scenario around me. Like, I'm very much like the act that's happening and what's happening in the sensation, what might be the sensations or the thoughts or the experience. So like, if, for example, if I were to be fantasizing about, as I'm reading a story and they're talking about, you know, femdom, you know, male submissive, I don't really see necessarily the scene other than the apparatus that the person might be on that's using. So for me, when I'm like, and even when I'm masturbating, like, and fantasizing without porn, I don't have a lot of like what the scene is around me or the story leading up to the scene. Like, my brain doesn't work that way. I'm kind of like, get in, get out, don't mess my hairdo. It's like, does that answer the question?
Yeah. And I find that really interesting because it's like, I've been recently discovering that different people have wildly different levels of what their brain actually creates in their mind when they're reading. You know, some people, it's all very abstract. It's the words on the page and the abstract concept of what's being talked about. For other people, it is like an incredibly detailed mental image that is created. And most of us are like somewhere in between those two. So when you add porn to the mix, which for me has always been a highly visual medium, I'm just like, I need to know everything. I was like, where do you fall on that spectrum? What do you see? Why are you interested in it? Like, my nerdy brain just is firing off on every possible.
Well, so, and it's interesting because you are visual, those were the things that you wanted to know, like, what does it look like? And what's the thing is, because your brain, the way that you have been interacting and working with it is a very, you know, just in this recent interaction, I sense that you are very detail oriented. Like like, even with the fact that you mentioned the shadows of things, right? Like, that is like incredibly detail driven and oriented in a visual experience.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would think about that if I were reading either. You know,
when you're watching it though, when you're watching porn, are those the pieces that you're picking up the arousal response though?
Well, I'm not sure. Honestly, I think a little bit. I think that for me, in filmed porn, in video porn, I think what's really important is the sort of the chemistry, like the interaction between the people. That's the most important part. So, you know, you could have like a really gross looking background that does nothing for me. The lighting could be bad, but if the people involved are really into each other, I'm probably not going to have any problem with whatever's going on in the background. But if I am not really there yet or not feeling super inspired by the action that's happening, then yeah, I think I try to like pick up on cues from the background and the lighting and kind of everything about what's going on to see like, okay, does this feel natural? Does this feel good? Like, does it feel bad, which makes it good? Like there's a big difference between a standard, like, quote unquote boy girl scene that's happening in like a porn McMansion where like, it's just like the perfect house. It's big and empty, everything echoes, and like the same scene being filmed in a public park. Obviously,
Yes.
there's a lot more excitement to the public park scene because there's that thrill factor. But again, like if the two people involved are just like so into each other and you can sense that, doesn't really matter to me where they are or what it looks like.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it really brings up an interesting, like, something that I have thought about a lot for the past 15 years while I have been writing about porn a lot, which is because I have watched so much porn as a reviewer and like an op-ed writer and an interviewer and a critic and, an author, all of these things that I've written about porn, I have consumed a very large amount of video pornography. And that's now my standard viewing apparatus and my standard consumption apparatus for porn. And I wonder what I'm missing out on. And I often wonder if my ability to fantasize has been limited by the fact that I do take it in so visually. Because I'm not creating these scenes in my mind when I'm watching something, it's being done for me.
Well, here's I'm going to put my teacher hat on for a second here.
Yes, please do. Oh, teach me, Gaia.
So often what you brought up is actually something that happens, actually. There's a desensitization that almost happens in your own ability to be able to create your own fantasies and the pieces of that exploration and pushing the boundaries because you've created it in your own world instead of it being given to you, right?
Yeah.
And what I found is that when we fantasize, the importance of fantasy, whether that's through reading porn or just, your Rolodex of your spank bank, your own fantasy world, right? That those are really important pieces of our adult development into being able to be a creative problem solver. Because it's in our abilities to look at a picture, to expand our imagination, to look outside of what we can see right here is what allows us to be a brilliant creative problem solving in all areas of our lives. So I found that people who actually spend more time, this has just been my experience, that the people who have spent more time in the fantasy without the visual stimulation of porn, but the fantasy realm of porn, tend to drop into easier creative problem solving and creativity in general in their lives.
That is fascinating. So that brings up other questions. I'm trying to stick to the path that we're on.
That's okay. Hold on. Let's go check on Facebook and see what's happening over there. Have we been kicked off? Who knows?
Are we still live? Hello?
We're still live. Okay. All right. We're good. All right. And I'm back with you.
This is very heady stuff for a conversation about porn. So I think we're doing okay. I mean, really, like so let's go back a little bit to the beginning. So this is a question that I often have asked people in interview situations, which I think can go in a number of directions, but I like to know where you started and where you've ended up. So what was the first experience that you ever remember having with pornography?
Playbook or Playboy.
No.
Like the old school before we had like videos and before we had like, I'm old. I know I don't look old, but I'm like old. I'm like 45, right?
Hey, looking good.
Thanks, man. So, like, I remember finding, like, when I was a little girl, me and my cousin found her father's stash of, like, Playgirls and, like, girly mags.
Wow.
Right. And, you know, us looking at them and then looking at our own parts and looking at each other's parts and being like, you know, we don't look like, you know, we don't have boobs. We got nothing, right? We don't have pubic hair. We don't have boobs. We're little girls, right? Like, we're young, right? And we're like, our bodies don't look like that. Why don't our bodies look like that?
What does it mean?
What does that mean? Right? So that was my very first experience into that world, would be that. And then I remember my very first movie I ever watched was called The Golden Bone. I can't even.
That's a great one. Oh my God. What a good name.
And the premise is like, you know, there's this award show, and the Golden Bone is the you know, the global, you know, like the award, right, for the best whatever. I can't remember, porn or whatever, right? And so somebody stole the statue, and there was like this whole mystery about trying to find the statue. And of course, while they're going on this mystery, they kept fucking people as they, you know, would end up wherever they would end up trying to find, you know, the statue.
As you do.
As you do, right? And at the end, they found the statue, and of course, there was a pool scene, like you said, the porn mansion, right? There was like a pool scene, and they used the golden bone, and everybody had a good time in the end, right? So, but that was my first porn, and it was very interesting because it was with my best friend, who was a guy, and he got the porn from his best friend, who stole it from his dad.
Yeah. That used to be the way.
That was the way, and it was on a VHS tape.
Yes.
Right? So me and my best friend are sitting there, and we're watching this, and it was really weird because there was arousal, but I was like, I'm not supposed to be aroused because I'm hanging out with my best friend, so like I shouldn't be aroused while I'm watching this thing, but I'm totally aroused. I don't know what to do with this arousal because I had already explored masturbation at this point, right, in my life. Man. So it was a very awkward and weird and incredibly uncomfortable experience.
I think that's pretty universal.
Yeah. And then he was awesome because he's like, here, would you like me to lend this to you? I'm like, yes. Then I watched it again by myself and got to masturbate. Right. And it was all good.
Oh, that is so nice. He understood. That's lovely.
I'm pretty sure he felt the same way. Like, yeah, it's so weird and awkward.
Oh, that's so good. I was just thinking that's like a parental nightmare situation, you know, because like parents were probably like, it's fine that her best friend is a guy. It's fine. As long as they don't do these 5 things together. Number 1.
Watch porn together.
At least that's in my world how I was brought up. That was definitely on the list.
What about you? What was your first?
I'm not actually sure what came first. My memory is just bad overall, and the longer ago it was, the worse it is. But I think that my first was my best friend's grandfather had a stash of Penthouse magazines in the upstairs bathroom at their house. And when she discovered them, she immediately invited all the rest of us over so that we could look at them. So we had like leafing through Penthouse Forum in the back, where they used to have all the letters written in about all the dirty things that people had so-called done.
Yes.
So we would like hang out in the bathroom. I don't know like how the adults around didn't notice that there were 3 of us in the bathroom for like an hour. Like, what do they think we were doing in there? And
it's so interesting that the adults just left the porn mags laying out.
I guess it was like, we're grandparents. We're not responsible for what the kids do here. I don't know. But yeah, like I remember reading those letters aloud to my friends. And I don't know, we were probably like 10. And then obviously also looking at the pictures, but I remember the stories more than the pictures. Like the ones that were like really gross. Like there was one that was a guy who was a janitor at some place, and there was a woman in the stall who like he went and had sex with her, and like it was like her foot was up on the flushing mechanism, and like the toilet kept flushing, so he was talking about like sewer water like coming out of the toilet and like splashing around their ankles. And I think I was at the perfect age where like gross out stuff like that still had a big impact on me.
Yeah.
But I was also aroused, and I remember I was just like, what is happening? I feel weird, like, oh, this is gross. Like I remember that story really clearly. And then I guess we were probably like 15 when a different friend, I had a very stable friend group throughout my living at home years. So same group of friends, but different friend was house sitting, and she was house sitting in this house that had this awesome entertainment center for the time. It had like a really big TV with like awesome speakers, and the friend whose grandfather had the Penthouse magazines, her parents had a VHS porn collection that she rated. And she brought this tape over, and so there were like 5 of us. We had popcorn, and we were alone in this house, and we were like, all right, let's do it. And so we were giggling so much that I don't really remember that much of the details. I don't know what the movie was called. We called it Boner Beach.
Nice.
And I'm pretty sure that the plot involved a bunch of people staying at a beach house together, and of course, like boning the whole time. But there were I think there were like 3 or 4 women and only 1 guy. So he had sex with everybody, and he was very, very hairy, which makes me think like by the time we were watching this, it was probably, I don't know, like very late 90s, but the hairiness of the male lead makes me think that it was probably filmed like early 80s,
in the
late
80s,
70s.
Yeah.
So it was very
when
old.
it was like boom chicka wow wow.
Yeah, I think that there was music.
Wow, wow.
It was very like grainy and fuzzy, and we were just like dying with laughter because like the situations that they came up with for them to have sex were just like so completely ridiculous. Like there was this one scene where this lady was in the kitchen and she was making a salad, but she could hear people in the other room getting it on. So she like looks at all of the like implements that she has out on the counter, and I'm like, oh, use the carrot. And everybody's like, yeah, the carrot, because it's like a nice big carrot. Instead, she chose a rib of celery to masturbate with. And we were like, what are you doing? It's not even shaped right. The ribbing is going in the wrong direction. What? No.
Fail! You fail!
What are you doing?
Love it.
So it was a blast. We had a great time, and that was in the age where like I think that my computer, my family computer at home had an internet connection, but like it took like 20 minutes to download a photo of like a boob, you know. So it was a while between Boner Beach and the next time that I saw any video porn.
I just remembered that my mom, I'm totally adding my mom right now. My mom, she had this book called The Secret Garden.
I know The Secret Garden. That's not a sexy book.
Well, no, there's 2 different books. There's one that's all about sex, and the other one is all about like the kids. That's the one like you're thinking about.
Consumptive children in Great Britain.
Yeah. No, that's not that book. It's the one where there's all these short stories. So the author of the book, she interviewed thousands of women and wrote down their porn stories.
I have heard about this. Yes, I have. Okay.
All right.
I know things.
And so it was on the back of the in the bathroom, on the back of the toilet one day. I was like, oh, what's this? And I like pick it up and I'm like, start reading. So, and this one, story was about this woman. She's at this football rally, and this man, comes up behind her in the stands and basically puts his hand, in her crotch, and he tells her not to turn around, and he whispers in her ear, and she gets off on the experience, and then he like leaves before she can see who he was. Whoa. And I remember reading this. I'm like, oh my God, this is really hot. And like, I'm like, what is happening? And it's like, where did this book come from? It was like this, it's like magic porn fairy showed up.
That's wild. It sounds almost like on purpose. Like your mom was like, it is time. And like, left it there for you.
So, I went and, masturbated thinking about how hot that story was and blah, 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 blah. And then, but my mom always had like lots of religious books on the back of the toilet, right? Like she was very much about like all diversity, right? So like there was like Buddhism and, all of the different religions of the world, right? So I think she probably just brought this book in and then she forgot that she left it in the bathroom. So anyways, so the next time I go to the bathroom, the next time I go in to masturbate, I go to try to find the book. I can't find the book. The book's nowhere to be found. I'm like, what happened to the magic book that had these magic stories in it? I'm like, what happened? I lost the book. And at that point, I couldn't actually have a conversation with my mom. Like, I couldn't have just said, hey, the porn book that was in the bathroom?
I need that.
Where'd you put the porn book?
Oh
but God. I did look through her, like I searched it out because it was really like this magic book of like, whoa. And so I went through all of her drawers. Like I tried to find this book, it disappeared.
She figured it out. She
years
came back in later and was like,
I bought the book so I could read the whole book. I only got one story out of it the first time around.
I gotta find that book. That sounds awesome. I hesitate to say this because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but when I was quite young, I came upon a copy of The Joy of Sex in a family member's things. And I guess it was quite a long time ago. It was even old when I found it when I was a kid, but that book was from, I think, the early 70s-ish.
It might be the late 60s.
Yeah, it might be. It's
very old.
There are lots of drawings in it of people performing the acts that the book is describing, and they're like line drawings, and they're hippies. They're the people involved are definitely hardcore hippies. There's lots of hair everywhere, and when I was growing up, I was always very interested in sex. Like I had a similar experience to yours. When I was very, very young, my parents had like How Babies Are Made book. And it had how babies are made for all different species, which I thought was really interesting. It was like, here's how plants reproduce, here's how lots of like birds reproduce, here's how humans reproduce. And I was like, wow. And I liked that book so much and asked my parents to read it to me so much that it conveniently disappeared by the time I was like 6. And I remember searching for it because something about that book was really interesting to me. And I didn't find it until years later, like tucked into this shelf situation that was like on a back porch kind of place where nobody ever looked. And I had just assumed, because we moved and it disappeared after we moved, so I had assumed it got lost in the shuffle. And then I found it again and I was like, they fucking hid it from me.
Jerk faces.
Jerks. So when I found The Joy of Sex, I was still pretty young, and I was like, my brain had been turning over all of those things that I read about in the How Babies Are Made book, trying to figure out how they actually looked, like how things really worked. And then I found The Joy of Sex, and it was like all my questions were answered, plus a whole lot of other information.
Nice.
And I would, like, if I had friends over, we would like sneak in and like find that book and like leaf through it real quick together and giggle a lot and then like put it away and run away. Like, I don't know that I actually really learned a lot from it because it was such a furtive thing, but it was really fun and weirdly educational. Like there were like Japanese like woodblock print style or engravings, or I don't even remember what, where like it's highly stylized. So you have two people, they're wearing like flowing robes and kimonos and stuff, and they're kind of all over the place, and then like the genitals were like huge.
Oh, and, yes, over the top.
Yeah, and like I remember just looking at them and be like, what am I looking at? Like it took a really long time to figure out who was doing what, and then some like Indian images of like, you know, wild positions that nobody in the Western Hemisphere had ever figured out yet.
Yeah, probably from the Kama Sutra. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember just like poring over these images, like trying to figure out what was going on. And then all of the line drawings of the hippies were like so much underarm hair, which I had never seen. Like, I think there was an image of somebody sucking on somebody else's underarm hair, and I was like, what?
Okay, that leads. I got a story about that. I shouldn't have a story about that, but
no. I like to be in company where I say something like that, and somebody says, "Oh, I have a story."
About that. So when I found the Joy of Sex book, I was 16, I think. I was 16, and I had been having sex for a long time, and you know, all this stuff. And so I was with this boy, and you know, we're reading the book, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, and learn all this stuff. And I remember coming to like the whole armpit section around the scent and the smell and the taste and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, ooh, this is so weird and so gross. And I'm like, I am nuts. Like I was like so adamantly like turned off by this whole thing about the armpit. I was like, oh, we can have anal sex, we can do all these other things, but do not touch my armpit. There's no way touching my armpit.
That's so weird. But I mean, like, it makes sense, but it's also really weird.
You know, right? So, and he was really into like smells, right? See, like I have a very sensitive sniffer, and so I only like really pleasant smells. Anything that has any kind of potency to it, it's like unpleasant for me. Like completely the opposite of arousal. It's the opposite of that, right? I like things that smell like flowers. If it doesn't smell like flowers, I'm not really into it, right? Arousal response, right?
Yeah.
So he was really into sniffing, right? And this was like a young in my beginning of my sexual development. Like now I would just be like, I'm a totally different person than I was back then, right? So
yeah.
So he was constantly trying to sniff my armpits all the time. I'm like, get away from me, you weirdo! Like I was like totally shamed him. Like it was not okay. Like now looking back on it, it's awful, right? But I remember him having a conversation. Says, see, this is a thing. People are turned on by this. Blah blah blah. Like he had proof. It was like he was making the book. There was proof in the book that I was the weirdo and he wasn't the weirdo.
Look, these hippies love it.
And it took me many, many years to move through my stuff around armpits and, you know, letting anybody else touch my armpits. And then I had my first armpit gasm. Once I get over it, like they weren't wrong. Like, you know, like I look back on it, I'm like, no, the hippies weren't wrong. They were right about the whole like nerve endings and the sensory stuff and the blah, 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 those kind of things. So,
it's a beautiful journey that you've been on with your armpits.
I've been getting full circle with my armpits. And I had a friend too who was all into armpits. I was like, you are weird. Like, it was like I was suspect all this time. People kept coming into my life that were into armpits. I was like, I'm like, what is wrong with all of you people? Why are you all into armpit sex?
The universe's armpit was beckoning you throughout your whole life. Come to the pit side.
Come to the pit side. Yeah. Funny.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I'm trying to think.
So I have a question for you, actually.
Okay.
So when was the first time you watched porn, engaged in porn with a partner? And what was that? How did that interaction happen?
That's a really good question. It was probably in college sometime, because college was the first time like I was living on my own and I had a computer of my own in like my own private room after a few years anyway. So probably it happened at some point there, but I don't have a clear memory of that, so I'm not sure. But I can say for absolutely certain that when I started my porn DVD reviewing gig in the late aughts, I definitely started watching porn with my partner at the time. And there was like a whole lot of like weird sort of build up around it, because in the years between college, so I went to college in New York City, and then I went on a few adventures in other parts of the country, and then came back to New York and moved in with my like long-term, like long-distance boyfriend at the time. And in the sort of the years between when I left New York and when I came back to New York, I had been living primarily like alone. I had been single, and I had lived in like several very remote areas. So I had taken to watching porn online to keep myself occupied, and I was getting worried about my masturbating alone to porn habit. So when I moved back to New York and I moved in with my boyfriend, I remember thinking like, great, I'm going to have a willing partner with me like most of the time, so I won't need to watch porn. And I did have a willing partner and we did have a lot of sex, but I still found myself watching a lot of porn, and I was like horrified by it, because I was like, I thought it felt bad. It felt like I was doing like something that I didn't need to be doing when he wasn't around, or like maybe I wasn't getting something out of our sexual relationship. So when I landed a gig as a porn reviewer for an adult magazine, I remember thinking, this is great. This is like sanctioned porn. Like, I'm
Nice.
supposed to watch this. So I don't have to keep it a secret that I'm watching a bunch of porn, and I can even invite him to watch it with me. So that'll be fun. So we watched some porn together, and it was like fine. I don't know. It wasn't a particular thrill for me though. I guess I mean, there's always like a little bit of awkwardness when you try something like that with someone. And I feel like he and I both had a little bit of like enough awkwardness about it that it never became like a thing that we were like, yeah, let's do that together a lot. It was more like, yeah, okay, well, this is a little weird. We're kind of turned on. Okay, I guess we'll have sex. But it wasn't like, yes, this is our thing now. And I've found that actually, like, in most of my relationships since then, that's been a continued theme. Like, okay, this is a little awkward and it's kind of fun, but it's not gonna be a theme. Which, I don't know. I'm ambivalent about it. There are other things to do with a partner besides that, so I don't watch a whole lot of porn with partners.
I remember the first boy who I watched porn with outside of my best friend, which was basically not long after that, I was like, hey, I want to see more of that. Now I had no access to it, right? Like that was part of this whole thing, like being a girl, like you couldn't go into the porn store. You couldn't go rent a porn. Like you can't, like, where are you going to get the porn? Like there was a lack of porn. And it's not like the world, it's not like today with the internet. We didn't have the internet. Back in
the 1900s.
We didn't have access. And I remember being like, and this particular boyfriend was really good about, he was all about exploratory. Like his whole mission in life was all about giving me the ultimate orgasm to make me pass out. Like that was his goal, right?
All right.
Which I feel really lucky in the beginning of my sexual activity that I found, that's who I found, and basically helped me become the sex goddess that I am because of that, right?
That's awesome, yeah.
So I was like, okay. So of course I told him about, the porn that I watched with my best friend, because we talked about that kind of stuff. And he's like, well, would you like to watch some together? I said, yes. I said, okay. But I'm like, I don't know how to get it. How do you get it? Right. And he was a couple of years older than me. He was 18. Yeah. So he was 18. So he could go and get porn, right?
Ooh, he had the hookup.
I had a hookup. So I remember him we watched different genres of porn because he was like wanting to see what actually turned me on. Huh. And the thing that really turned me on back then was girl on girl action. But I couldn't admit that turned me on. Like I couldn't, like, so it was this weird thing about, like, I had this shame that it turned me on. I didn't want to admit that it turned me on. And I was like worried that I'm going to be a lesbian and all this stuff. So this was like before I went on the journey of like owning my sexuality. Right. Mm-hmm. And so he would be like, put his hand between my legs, and he'd be like, so, we would be watching porn, and there's like a couple, and, and then there's like a threesome with two dudes and a girl. And then there would be like the scene where there's like two women. And every time it came to the two women, he would put his hands between my legs, and I'd be like dripping wet. And he's like,
gotcha.
Yeah. He's like, does that turn you on? I'm like, no, it's disgusting. And he was like, but he was smart enough to be like, it doesn't really matter whether she's ready to look at that or not. It is what it is. So like, I was very lucky that he was enlightened in that way.
Yeah.
Right?
For an 18-year-old guy, that is pretty advanced.
Oh yeah. He was quite advanced, because he was like, whatever. You can tell yourself whatever you want, but your vagina's lying. Your vagina's telling the truth. You're lying. You're lying. Vagina's true. You're lying. Your vagina's true.
The vag knows.
The vag knows. The vag knows. So yeah, so that was kind of like, that was an interesting experience of like, I really enjoyed it and I really wanted to watch more, but I didn't want him to know why I really wanted to watch more, because I felt shame about the fact that I was really turned on by watching two women have sex.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so there was all this weird sort of stuff that was interplay in the arousal response with the shame, with all of the pieces, right?
Yeah. It's so complicated.
It is very complicated.
I'm not going to remember enough of the details that this will come across sounding nearly as smart as I want it to. But there was a study done, I think in the early 2000s, that used a plethysmograph to measure blood circulation in the genital area of cisgender women while they watched a variety of different, like, I think they had completely non-pornographic material, and then they had pornographic material showing, men with men, women with women, men with women. They even had like some like apes having sex in there, and they would ask the women after viewing each type of clip how turned on they felt, and then they would compare that result with what the plethysmograph said. And the plethysmograph said that most of these women were turned on by literally all of the pornographic material, including the ape sex. Like, there was engorgement of the area from all of the sexual activity that they watched. But most of the women only would report feeling turned on by the things that they said turned them on. So if they were, heterosexual, the guy and the girl getting it on would turn on their brains and their bodies.
Yes.
And there haven't been a ton of studies that have followed that up to like try to figure out more about what those findings mean. But I find that really interesting because the vag knows. But for cisgender men, it's the opposite. They literally only get turned on by what they say they like. And I think there's like so many different reasons that those two things could be true.
Yeah.
I think men have a lot less shame about what they like, generally speaking. They're not taught to be ashamed of their bodies, but there's also like a big disconnect between the way that cisgender women think they get turned on and what actually does it for their bodies. So
oh yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating, and that in itself could be like a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
All right, so we really just talked about our own journey today.
Yeah. Well, so
which is awesome, and which I want to close up because we've been almost like an hour, but I want to like, leave everybody with something, like maybe a porn challenge. Let's do a porn challenge.
Have somebody put their hands between your legs while you're watching porn that you don't think you like. See what happens.
But I think that we should like leave the audience with like some, like for you, I would say you can give me a challenge. I'll give you a challenge. Okay.
Oh.
And then we can give the audience a challenge.
Okay. All right. My challenge for you is next time you are reading super hot porn, spend a little time thinking about what the environment looks like. I want to know what your brain comes up with.
Okay. I can do that.
Cool.
Well, my challenge to you is super easy. Start reading porn. See what happens.
Where should I go? Like,
okay, so all right. So one of the there's what's the name of it? I'll send you a couple links of like erotica. Literotica, actually literotica.com.
Oh, yeah, I know about them. Okay.
Right, is a good one. I want more hardcore extreme stuff, so I go to XXNX, and then they have all the videos and all that stuff, but they also have a section where it says sex stories. And you can click in the sex stories section, and it gives you a content warning of like what you're getting yourself into, so that you know what you're getting yourself into, that you're not reading, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Wow, red, not okay."
Armpits, nah.
So those are the more, I would say hardcore spaces. There's a lot of like female erotica, friendly spaces where it's a little less intense. But seeing that you've watched porn forever and reviewed, I'm pretty sure you're good to navigate wherever you need to go.
Yeah. I'm a seasoned professional.
Yeah, but for anybody who's listening at this point, that's kind of a newbie to this concept. Let's start somewhere. Don't go to XXNX, okay? Do not go there, all right?
Not for beginners.
Not for beginners. Start, because you'll be traumatized, and then you're going to have to call me, and you'll be like, Gaia, you traumatized me. Now I can't have sex ever again. So, yeah, don't go there, okay? Newbies, don't go there, all right? So that would be my challenge for you, is just to start like really and see what that experience is like for you. Like, what does it feel like? What are the thoughts process? And what happens the next time you masturbate without porn?
Yeah, right. Oh gosh, I'm going to be on a whole journey. This is great. Honestly, I think I've been kind of wanting to explore that, but I kind of needed like a prompt. I needed like, or an excuse, be like, I'm going to bookmark some time for this activity,
Nice.
Yeah.
For our audience, I'm going to give them the same challenge. So if you watch porn, like if you are visually stimulating and you're always watching porn, first of all, I would switch over from high gloss porn to amateur porn, because that will help with, and we didn't get into all the things about the good, the bad, the ugly of like porn, which is going to be our next you're coming back on. We're going to have a conversation about that.
I'll report back in.
And then you can report back in. I'll report back in.
Cool.
So you move over to amateur porn so that you're seeing real people with real bodies having real sex. So that's really important. And that I recommend going and reading because it helps with creating, like I said, helps with your creative problem solving skills, and it helps you to expand and exercise your brain and your imagination, which is a really important part of, being able to see the world from different viewpoints and different perspectives. If you read porn and that's your consumption typically, then your challenge is to go watch some porn. And go watch some porn that is not normally in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Because for me personally, I think pornography can be used not as an educational tool, never as an educational tool. You can never learn anything from porn, okay? It's very important. Okay, I just need to say that, all right? But I think porn can be used from this beautiful place of inspiring new possibilities and new journeys of our sexual evolution and our sexual development.
Agreed.
And when we look at it from that perspective, then it doesn't have any negative benefit. It doesn't have any negative byproducts to it. And so I think that that's a really beautiful thing. So if you watch, you listen, you read, whatever it is that you do something new, expand out a little bit, and go into a genre that you don't normally use, and do that piece around what is your body telling you your arousal response is, not what your brain is. Because that's the space in which our deep sexual arousal response comes from, is not what we intellectually have said is okay for us to be turned on by. It's the parts where we don't think are okay for us to be turned on by that we are turned on by the most.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh boy, I can't wait till we talk again. I have all these little I'm like,
make notes, write it out. All right, how can people spend more time with you, Lynsey?
Well, the most direct way is my website. It's lynseyg.com, and I'm going to spell it because my name is spelled weirdly. It's lynseyg.com. There's no D in it. Forget the D. You don't need a D to hang out with me. Hey, that rhymes. From my website, you can find all of my social media and all of the other things that I do in different places on the internet. And yeah, just explore from there.
Beautiful. Thanks for being on the show. It was so much fun. Much fun.
I love having conversations like this because you just don't have an opportunity in everyday life to talk about your first experiences with porn.
I know. I've never had this conversation publicly. And my audiences are like, "Ooh, we're getting to learn more about Gaia."
Yeah.
Right on. I'd like to have you on as a regular guest because I think this is going to be a great series of leaning into all the pieces, because today we just talked about our own journey. We didn't talk about anything about how it affects people, how it affects relationships, how to navigate that, how to move with it in a healthy way, how it cannot be in a healthy way. We didn't get into anything about what's happening in the industry. We didn't get into any of those things. And you and I were talking before we went on Hit Live, was that this is a huge topic. So you are now you ready for it? My Orgasmic Life's porn expert.
Awesome.
I dab you.
Thank you. I have been anointed.
You've been anointed as the porn expert of My Orgasmic Life.
I like it. I humbly accept.
Excellent. So, for all of our listeners, all of our viewers, thank you for hanging out with us today. You want to spend more time with me, you can visit me at succulentliving.com for all your sexual wellness needs. For all your BDSM needs, you can find me at empressgaia.com. For all of your online education and training, you can find me at succulentliving.com under the Work With Us and online training. All the links will be in the show notes. Let's see what else. Oh, if you love me, which I know you do, then come support my Patreon. Come support me so that I can support you guys and keep showing up for you guys. And if you can find me on the social media under Gaia Morrissette and Empress Gaia. And don't forget to check out ticklelife's podcast, which I also host, which Lynsey was also on. So if you wanted to learn about that boyfriend that she moved back to New York and the adventures of that boyfriend, that's the same boyfriend, right, that we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure. She gives a lot of juicy details about all of that and sex and group sex and swingers and all sorts of good stuff. So go check out that episode on my tickle.life's podcast.
Yeah, that was a good time.
It's a good time. So thanks for being with us. And I lovingly invite you to go explore pornography. And we'll be back with another episode about it. Probably in a couple months, actually.
Cool.
So, that's it. That's all. Bye-bye.
Bye.